In this getting started video for Cabana 7 for Figma with Token Studio, I'm going to walk you through how to apply all the tokens that we provided in this file. First up, you'll see all of our token sets here. They each contain different structures of tokens. This global set houses all of the raw values that we've defined for here. I like to think of this like in cooking. This is my mise en place. These are all the ingredients that I have cut up and prepared for the recipe that I'm cooking. So these are individual numbers, hex values for colors, font families, so on and so forth. These aren't meant to be used directly. Instead, these are all referenced in the subsequent token sets. First up is alias. Now this is going to be tokens that you do use to apply. So for sizing, we have all the numbers in our sizing ramp. We have the spacing in our spacing ramp, as well as alpha colors and gradients. Now, if I hover over a gradient here, and this is similar for all the tokens in this set, this is what's referred to as a composite token. This is a token that's referencing multiple tokens from within the global set to define a more complex token. In this case, this is using angle tokens, color tokens, and gradient stops to define the direction and colors. We also have our border radii, border widths, shadows, again, pulling multiple tokens from global. And we also have our type ramp. Now our themes are a little bit different. These are a little simpler. The themes only house color tokens. We do have two sets here, and if I switch between these two, you'll notice that they have the same exact structure. The difference is actually the value of any of these individual tokens. So I have this page token color, and this is using our neutral 800 here in dark, and in light, it's using pure white. What you can do to make sure you have everything set up properly is we do have these themes in Token Studio. And you'll see that it matches the light and dark theme, but what this also does, if I manage these, is it is activating all of the proper token sets that go along with this in order to make sure that light theme is actually working properly. It's not so important here because we have a very simple set of token sets, but in more complex multi-dimensional design systems where we might have different token sets for light, dark, high contrast, as well as different platforms like mobile, desktop, web, TV, it can get pretty complex to enable the right token sets for the screen that you're defining. So having these themes set up to enable those is very important. But for now, I'm just going to enable this light theme. You don't see anything change because I already had these enabled. But if I set dark, you'll notice that it unchecks the light theme and then checks the dark theme. One of the things that the way that Token Studio works is very similar to CSS. And it's really only relevant for these two in this case because they have the same structure. But essentially, the token sets that are lower in this list, when activated, if similar token sets are enabled, like if I enable light theme here, if I go to apply this to my card that I've created here, even though I have both selected, because dark is lower in the list and has these same tokens, it overwrites the value from above. So it essentially ignores all of the tokens that are coming from light. But if I disable the dark, you'll see that this updates back to light. But if I enable dark and disable light, nothing changes. So now we're going to build this card, and I'll show you how to apply the various kinds of tokens in order to build this. To get started building this card, I've prepared several elements. I have a few components from Cabana 7, and I have two text strings. I know as part of building this card that I want to have my buttons in a group, so I can select both of these and hit Shift-A on the keyboard. They're still stacked vertically, and I want to change that to horizontal, so I can change that here. And I hit Command-R, and I rename this to button group, so it'll be easier to find later. And I want to select the rest of these and also put those in an auto layout group. Hit Command R again. And I rename this to my card. Now I'm going to come up to alias and I'm going to start thinking about the structure of this card. So I want to change this to a larger header. So in alias, I can scroll down to our type ramp and I want to set this to headline 24 semi-bold. I don't have any changes I want to make to our placeholder, but I'm going to change this body text to body 16. I also want to change the spacing of this. I want to make sure I have my card layer selected. And I can come over here back to the top and I have my spacing values here. When I click this token, it sets the gap, so the spacing between all of the elements. If I want to use this for padding on the top and bottom and left and right, I can right click this. And this gives me the ability to actually set it to specific sides. But in this case, I just want it all around. And we won't see this until we apply a background color, but I'm also going to apply a border radius and a border width. Similarly to the spacing tokens, if I right click, I can choose to apply the border radius to any of the given corners. And you can have multiple, all, or none selected at a given time. In this case, I'm just going to say all. And I'm going to put a 1 pixel border width. Again, if I right click, I do have different options on how I want to apply this. And I'm going to apply a drop shadow. Now switching to our themes, I'm going to start with dark theme here. I want to make sure I apply a background to this. I can select the text here and come down to this text group that we have. Just say this is body. And then I want to apply subtle. I want to change the way that these behave in this auto layout. I'm going to change this to fill. This to fill. And I forgot to add a spacing token to the button group. So there we go. So now this is all defined with auto layout, so I can resize this and everything will reflow. But the really handy thing is now that this is defined with tokens, if I switch the theme to light, it'll update the card to light theme. Same thing for going back to dark. Now all of the components within Cabana 7 have been built utilizing tokens. So I can select a button, for example, and you can see the tokens that have been used to build this. So I've got my spacing tokens here. I can see the colors that are used for the fill. And what I can also do is switch to this Inspect tab. And while I have Deep Inspect selected up here, what that's going to enable me to do is look at all of the tokens that are applied to the layer selected, as well as any of the child layers. The Inspect tab also enables me to make changes to any of the tokens that have been applied to this component. So if I want to change this to a success button, all I have to do is edit the name. One thing to keep in mind while using Token Studio is to leave this apply button to apply to selection. If you're working in a larger file, changing this to something like apply to page or apply to document could mean that Token Studio takes quite a while to finish applying all of the changes. So we recommend using apply to selection to keep things moving quickly. So that's getting started with Token Studio on how to navigate the token sets, the different kinds of tokens, as well as applying tokens.